Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Misty Allen and I am here with Catherine Wiegert. We are the specialists with Duval County Public Schools Gifted Department, and we are so excited to be here with you tonight and that you have decided to spend some time with us and learning more about your gifted children. This is the first session in a four-part series that the Gifted Department is bringing to you in conjunction with Parent Academy. Tonight, we're going to hear from Erica Whitfield, who is a licensed mental health counselor who works specifically with gifted students. If you have questions during tonight's presentation, as Ms. Copeland just said, if you just want to type those into the chat box, Ms. Wiegert and I will be monitoring that all night, answering questions, but then also we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation where we will have Ms. Whitfield answer your specific questions. So I don't want to take away any of her time, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Erica Whitfield. And thank you so much, and I'll see you at the end of the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. All right, I'm going to turn on my screen here. Thank you so much, Reagan, Misty, and Catherine, for the awesome introduction. Welcome, parents, to this Parent Academy session where we are going to discuss how we as parents can help support the mental wellness of our gifted and high-performing, creative, and talented students. They are all of these things. So I'm so excited you're on the call. As Misty said, I am a licensed mental health counselor, and so I see gifted students come into my office all the time, and not for academic support, but for mental wellness support. So today we're going to talk about the common issues that gifted kids struggle with and how we can best support them. This is going to be incredibly interactive. So I want you to put it in the chat. If I say something and it sparks a question, Misty's going to help read those questions out and I'll stop and answer those. If you have a story you want to tell, put that story in the chat. We're going to learn so much from each other this evening, and I just can't wait to interact and be engaged with you all today. All right, so let's get right into it. So first, I want to define gifted kids. So at my practice, we really define gifted children as children who enjoy expressing themselves through the arts, through academics, or in other ways. And at our practice, we consider all children gifted because each child has unique talents, skills, or characteristics. So sometimes, many times, giftedness is assessed with psychoeducational testing or ability testing. Sometimes we know that a child is highly skilled with a musical instrument. Or sometimes we may have a child who is gifted in a certain area, but maybe they have not been assessed for that talent, and we don't know that it's there. So giftedness can take the form of many different things, and it's important for us to be looking out for that. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm a licensed mental health counselor with over 11 years counseling children and adolescents, board certified in telemental health, and also a certified therapeutic art life coach. So you have a wealth of experience on the call here tonight. Please take advantage of this as much as you like. So let's start to look a little bit more about what this group looks like. Our gifted kids, our talented kids, our high performers, our creative kids. So if your child is enrolled in several advanced placement, honors, or gifted classes, that's an obvious sign that you may be working with a gifted child. You may have a gifted student on your hands. And our kids are very intentional about these classes that they take. So our gifted students are already planning for the future. They know that these advanced classes are going to get them credits for college, and they already know what college they want to go to, and they have plans to go to NASA and start the first colony on Mars. And these are not grandiose thoughts. They legitimately have identified the programs that can get them into NASA to make their dreams come true. So our kids are very focused on their academics. It's incredibly important to them. Strives for perfection. This is another indicator. And the reason you may see our gifted and high performers strive for that perfection is because what they do, they see as a reflection of who they are. So they want everything that they do. They want their schoolwork, they want their grades to be the best because they see themselves as striving to do the best as they possibly can. So what they do, they want it to be a reflection of how they feel inside. Shows higher levels of emotional intelligence than other peers. So our gifted kids may be able to have more emotional depth to them. They may feel things more intently than other children do. avoids new challenges, gives up easily, or becomes distressed when faced with tasks that cannot be easily mastered. Now, this is a big one. So, with our gifted kids, there's often this idea that they feel like they were innately born with certain skills. And so, when they come up and they face a challenge that they're not used to, or something challenges them to get to a level that they feel uncomfortable with or cannot easily achieve, we see a lot of things like giving up easily or just wanting to throw in the towel because they're not used to having to put in that extra effort in order to succeed. And then we may see things like equating good grades or achievement with self-worth. And I think we all do this. We live in a society that defines us by what we do. And many times we think that we're not valuable unless we're doing something or achieving something, accomplishing things. So put it in the chat. Let me know if you can identify with any of these signs or if you've seen your gifted child display any of these things. And Misty, feel free to interrupt me at any time and let me know what's coming in the chat. Okay, so I want to know if you've heard your gifted or high performing students say any of these things. I can't do that because I have too much homework. All right, so we've got tests, we've got projects, we have extracurricular activities, we may have a soccer game on Saturday. Oftentimes, gifted students may feel like there's just not enough time. There's a ton of things on their plate, and they tend to be people pleasers as well. So sometimes it's hard for them to say no or to take things off their plate because they don't want to disappoint others. You may have heard a gifted child say, "This has to be perfect." We talked about that. It's a reflection of how they see themselves. Maybe they crumble up their homework over and over again because it's just not right. Or they started on a project and they put that project to the side, they've thrown it away and started all over again because they wanted to just master what it was that they were doing. I don't have time to do anything fun. So when you're bogged down with advanced courses and extracurricular activities, you may want to hang out, but just not be able to find that time to do so. I barely get any sleep. So I've had gifted kids come into my office telling me that they've stayed up until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then woke back up at 6 o'clock a.m. just to get all of their work done. Side note, I have a friend who attended a gifted program when she was in high school, and she literally told me she would skip school in order to make sure that she could get her work done. The rest of us were going to the mall. She was skipping school to get her schoolwork completed. So there's a lot of stress here. You may have also heard a gifted child say something like, "I don't want to do this anymore. I quit." And again, that goes back to that whole fixed and growth mindset. If you're familiar with Carol Dweck, she wrote an awesome book called Mindset. And it speaks about how we can have a fixed mindset or we can have a growth mindset. Now, with a fixed mindset, we may give up easily when we're faced with a challenge because we're not used to challenges. We're used to things coming easily for us. We don't know that maybe we should just study harder or try again. We don't know that a failure could actually lead us to a success. Now the growth mindset says, there's a challenge here, and maybe I didn't get it the first time, but I'm going to keep trying and ask questions and get the help I need until I figure it out. And then I'm eventually going to get it. You may have heard a gifted child say, "Can I stay home from school for a month?" So everyone needs a break. Many of us have taken a day off of work. Many of us have let our own children take a day off of school because they just needed a break. But it's a gradual process that happens here where I'll see a gifted child, maybe they just took a day, but then that day turns into 3 days. Okay, they were overwhelmed, they're just trying to regroup, but now that 3 days has turned into 3 weeks. And if you've ever talked with a high performer, you will know that if they miss 1 day of school, there is a tremendous amount of work that they have to make up. So imagine being the kid who was so overwhelmed and stressed out that she missed 3 weeks of school. It can leave you completely feeling hopeless, like you'll never be able to catch up. So we can see things like that, school avoidance. We might hear a gifted child say, "I don't have any friends." And that may be either from lack of time, or that may be they've been so immersed in their field of talent, in their field of study, that maybe they didn't make making friends a priority. Or maybe they're just a little awkward and they don't know how to make friends. Or we could hear a gifted child say something like, I don't want to ask questions because I will look dumb. Now, this one is a biggie. So, gifted kids or high ability performers often have this image that they feel like they have to live up to, of knowing all the answers, of being right. People come to them to seek their advice. Students come to them to get their help. They're tutoring others. So it can be very, very hard to admit vulnerability when you're gifted. There can be a lot of denial that takes place. I don't need any help. There can be refusal of help. I'm fine. I'm independent. I can do this on my own. Or there may just be this thought of not wanting to be a burden on others. I've seen that a lot. So imagine being a high performer, coming from a high performing family where it looks like everyone's doing well, and then you have a problem. And it can feel incredibly isolating. So even if you have a gifted child who is in a super supportive family, they don't want to appear to be the weak link in the chain. We have a strong family. I have to maintain that image of us being a strong family, of us not having any problems, of us being able to figure everything out and not needing any help. So there can be a lot of that image that they feel like they need to live up to. If you can identify with any of these little thought bubbles here, put it in the chat. Misty, do we have anything in the chat so far?
Yes, we have lots of comments in the chat. And can you talk a little bit about the signs of anxiety? We have some parents sharing stories about their children avoiding school, having dizziness, even vomiting from the level of anxiety they feel. So could you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. And what I hear being described are somatic symptoms. So sometimes anxiety can manifest itself in the form of physical symptoms. You will hear gifted kids complain of stomach aches, of headaches. Very interesting. I worked with one gifted child who would always develop a headache around the same time of the day at school, and it was when advanced math started. It was incredibly difficult for her to do this class, and it just triggered a lot of anxiety. And we're going to talk about that a little later, but I'm going to go ahead and just give you some more things to look out for with anxiety. Thoughts of excessive worry. We all worry, but this is worry that interferes with your child's ability to function. Obsessive worry. We may even see compulsions develop, impulsive compulsions, like having to constantly fidget with hands or twirl hair. There's trichotillomania, where we're actually pulling hair from our heads or from our eyebrows or another place. There is things like biting. Even our older kids will do things, and all it is our body's way of indicating that something's wrong, and it's trying to let us know that we need to deal with that energy. But we'll talk even more about anxiety in just a bit.
Okay, and then one other question I've seen is, how do I get my child to be more driven? Their parents are commenting that they see their child self-sabotage, doubt their ability, and then obviously avoidance of school or hard task.
Oh yeah, awesome comments, parents. You guys are, you know your kids. Okay, so with and Misty, I got so excited by that question, I almost forgot the meat of it. So I'm getting at what with that question now? One more time.
How do I get my child to be more self-driven?
Yes, self-driven. Okay, now we'll address this later too, but I'm going to give you a little tidbit. Be very careful when it comes to that whole notion of your child underperforming. And I'll tell you why. Sometimes our kids can get to a level where they are starting to either burn out, maybe the work is too much and they are slowly shutting down, and that looks like lack of motivation. Sometimes they start having these existentialist thoughts of, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? Is this really meaningful to me? Are these my goals, or are these the goals of someone else? Is this the person I want to be? And that is a normal developmental issue. So as they start to become more independent thinkers and think about the individuals that they want to grow into, you can see things like that. where there was strong motivation before, but then it starts to decline. So it could be fatigue, it could be contemplating ideas of self-identity, or it could be something simple like just a tutor's needed, or they just need to work a little bit harder or ask for help.
How about finding that balance between giving up and hard work?
Oh, I love that. So, in that case, what I would suggest is to sit down with your child and talk about what that looks like. So imagine having three different categories. We've got green. This is I'm trying my best. I'm super motivated. We have yellow. This is I'm slowing down a little bit. I'm not quite sure if I want to keep moving on in this direction. Maybe I need to reassess and evaluate what I'm doing here. And then we have red, which is stop, hold the phone. I'm 100% sure that I do not want to do this anymore. And then start identifying what characteristics that they display when they're in each zone. And so when you see them displaying those characteristics that fit that zone, that can lead to some great discussion about like, hey, you're doing great, you're feeling great, keep going. Or yellow, let's look at this. Do you want to stay in all advanced classes, or do you want to do a mixture, some regular classes, some advanced? Or do you want to end your participation in the gifted program because you want to focus more on just being able to not have all this pressure in a school year? So think about just boundaries. What falls in your red, what falls in your yellow, and what falls in your green. All right, we're going to keep going, and then we're going to pick up some more of your awesome questions, so keep them coming. So these are the 4 main stressors that have been identified for gifted kids. All right, so there's that perfectionism, this idea that everything that I do has to be my best. And it's not even necessarily perfect. It's not necessarily that all gifted kids are trying to be perfect, but they are trying to do their very, very best. And that's really important for them. There's sensitivity. And now this sensitivity can be looked at in 2 different ways. So we have a sensitivity of not necessarily wanting to be viewed as vulnerable. So you may have reached out to a gifted, creative, high performer before to say, hey, do you need some help in this area? Or I see you're struggling with this. And more than likely, you may have been met with defensiveness. And why? Because in their minds, they don't need help. They can figure it out themselves. They are not someone who should even be questioned about needing help. Now, there's this other side of it where gifted kids can feel more intently than others. So think about the things that we see in the news, heartbreaking things happening around the world. Some of us can watch that and be fine in the next minute. Our gifted kids really sit with those issues and those feelings. I listened to a podcast recently that talked, a social worker was talking about a gifted child that she was working with. He learned about this horrible issue overseas where kids were starving. It impacted him so much to the point where he stopped eating. So they can feel more intently than others do. And then we have external pressure. So external pressure, that's coming from our teachers. Our teachers have to move quickly in these advanced classes. They have to cover a lot of material. They may say things like, come on, guys, we got to keep going. In rare cases, but I have heard this from some of my gifted students, they may say something like, you guys should already know this stuff. Or, at this level, I shouldn't have to repeat myself as many times as I do. And on one hand, the teachers are right. This is advanced curriculum, and they don't have time to slow down that much. But on the other hand, think about the messages that's sending to our gifted kids. It's really internalizing their very fears. They should already know it. They shouldn't have to ask questions. And now that's only a small little handful that I'm talking about of teachers. Many of our gifted teachers do take that time to slow down, do let their kids ask as many questions as they want. They have after hours where kids can go and get additional help. But some of my kids have told me that some teachers have said these kinds of things to them. Let's go back to external pressure. And there's also parent pressure. So if you're like me, there's a certain amount of expectations that you have for your high performer. You don't just hold them to the normal average Joe standard. They're exceptional individuals, and so we hold them to exceptional levels, and that can come with a lot of pressure. And even peers, okay? If the bulk of their advanced classmates get a 98 on an assignment and they get a 92, that's a problem for them. They want to be with the best of the best. And then there's social problems. So again, whether it's not having the time to socialize or maybe just not having those social skills to make friends can cause stress for our gifted or high performing kids. If you have any comments or stories or questions you want to ask about any of these, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them in a minute.
We just had a question come in about suggestions for their teens making friends at school. So the teenager is having trouble adjusting and socializing.
Yeah, so my suggestion with that would be first, really identify what the desire of your teen is. So if that teen has no desire to make friends, then you're going to be climbing an uphill battle here. Now, if you have a teen who does have a desire to make friends, try seeing if you can find any groups where they're surrounded with like-minded individuals, people who have similar interests, people they can really connect with, because it can be kind of difficult for a gifted or advanced student to make connections if they're talking about starting a colony on Mars, but these group of kids are talking about going to the mall. So you can see where the mismatch would be. Gifted kids might be bored with that or just feel like they can't relate to that or really get into that experience. So assess, is this what my kid really wants? And then if it is, they'll be motivated to participate in any kind of, I'll call it social interventions that you want to try to set up for them. So try to find like-minded individuals for them to hang around. Yeah.
Okay, another question we've gotten is a student sings a lot when they're stressed out, which is great, but then it takes them a really long time to get their tasks complete. So do you have suggestions when they're using something like that to avoid or procrastinate?
Oh, you guys are giving the good ones. Okay, so let me think about that. When we have a student who sings, because, and when I hear that, and I know you're identifying that when you posted your statement, I'm hearing someone who needs to sing in order to kind of get grounded for what they're about to do, but it slows them down in the process. My mind immediately goes to like a gradual desensitization process where we measure how long is the student singing. Okay, are they singing for 15 minutes, but we only have 5? And then let's see if we can slowly get them to taper that down a little bit. Now, ideally, we would let them sing the entire time because that's a natural coping strategy that they've developed in order to do well. So I really don't want to take away their singing at all. But if it's causing that disturbance and interfering with their ability to take that test, or it's decreasing the amount of time they have, let's see if we can get that singing to 12 minutes next time. Now let's see if we can get that singing to 10. Maybe have a little timer there. All right, now let's see if we can get that singing to 8. And then whatever your secret sweet spot number is, gradually desensitize that singing down to that sweet spot number so that they can still have enough time to finish that test.
All right, great suggestion. We've had several parents comment that the news or radio shows like NPR are very upsetting and emotional for their children. So what's the appropriate balance between their curiosity and having them be informed about global issues and then cutting off where they're not negatively affected by it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so go back to that boundary chart. How do we know I'm watching the news and everything is okay? How do we know I'm getting a little anxiety about what I'm seeing? And how do we know red zone, this is too overwhelming, I need to turn the TV off? That's one strategy. Another strategy I like to do, and I actually use this with kids who have nightmares, is, and the idea is the reason why there's so much sensitivity around these horrible things happening is the lack of control. So there's a lot of control that gifted kids have in their talent or in their academics. And so when something's happening outside of their control, that's incredibly overwhelming. So what you can do is have them voice what they would want to see. Okay, so when a kid has a nightmare, I have them draw out the nightmare, and then I have them do a corrective emotional experience where they draw a resolution to that nightmare. So a scary monster popped out. What are you going to do to get rid of that scary monster? So if there's a world global issue happening, you can have a really thoughtful discussion of, man, if you were in charge, what kind of policies and systems would you put into place to help make this better? And so now they have a sense of at least being able to have power in their thoughts. And you never know, you could inspire our next political leader here to actually go out and do something and make change in this issue.
Can you talk to us about how to get children more self-confident in who they are?
Yeah. Okay. So this really ties into development and how old they are. All kinds of variables really tie into that. And I think the key to self-confidence is self-acceptance. So they have to know that there's this from parents, there's an unconditional positive regard. You're going to be with them no matter what. Whether that report card has all A's or that report card has all F's, you love them the same. You may give some consequences for that. You may put some support systems in place for that, but you love them nevertheless. So listening to them, well, we're going to talk about all of these in a minute. I actually better stop answering so many questions so I can give you the tips. But yes, we're going to get into that in more detail. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. And if these issues that we discuss, let's back up here, perfectionism, sensitivity, external pressure, social problems, these things can manifest themselves into what we were talking about earlier. We already talked about anxiety, that excessive worry, the somatic symptoms. We can see depression. This is them isolating themselves from others, feeling like no one understands what they're going through. And sometimes they're right. I mean, how often are they going to run into someone who understands their pain because they made a 92 when they wanted to make a 98? People don't care about that they can't relate to it. So there's this situation of nobody really understands what it's like, to be like me. We can see mood swings, and that just comes from stress, irritability, frustration about everything that's on their plate. And then we can even see things get to the extreme where our kids may start self-harming. And the most common form of self-harming is the cutting. Okay, put any kind of questions or comments you have about that in the chat, and hopefully we can get to them later. All right, now the reason you are here, let's talk about some of the things that we can do to help our gifted kids as parents. Okay, so the first thing, parents, that I would like you to do is to ask your child about their goals. I'm going to use a report card as an example. So how often when a report card comes home, we look at it and we say, okay, you made A's and B's. Awesome job. That's what I expected of you. All right, we judge it. We place judgment on their efforts. What I would like you to start doing is to ask them what they expect. So you may have an expectation that your child make all A's and B's, but they may come back and say, well, you know what, this semester is incredibly hard, and actually, I'm going to be doing great if I just pass. Or you might have a child say, well, I know you want me to make all A's and B's, but actually I want all A's. That's what I'm capable of doing, and that's what I'm going to work towards. So ask your child what their expectations are, because they may even surprise you in a good way. If they surprise you in a bad way by saying something like, well, I just want to pass, then negotiate. Okay, well, just passing, kid, isn't good enough for me. Can you at least, throw in a couple of A's and B's here or there for me, and come to a great middle ground that the both of you can be happy with? All right, put it in the chat if you have any questions or comments about that. I'm going to keep going, and then we'll come back and grab it later. All right. The next thing I would like you to do is to ask your child to evaluate their own outcomes. And by the way, the person who made the comment, how do I help my child develop confidence? These are the answers to your question. Number one, ask your child about their goals. Number two, ask your child to evaluate their own outcomes. So again, that report card comes home and we say, oh, good job. You did well. But how often do we turn that report card around and say, okay, let's see your grades here. Talk to me about it. What do you think about how you did? Okay, and so the idea here is that we're getting our kids to start judging their performance by their own standards. And the reason we want to do this is think about them developing into that self-confident individual in the future. We want them to work on goals because they truly care about those goals. For the person who asked the question about how do I get my child to increase their motivation, the answer is when there's true motivation to do something, you actually need very little prompting. When you are truly internally motivated to work on a goal, it usually does not take a lot of intervention to get you moving in a direction because you're passionate about it. Your passion for what you're doing gives you that energy and motivation to move forward. So ask your child to evaluate how they're doing because we eventually want them to judge what they do based on their standards rather than judge what they're doing based on another person's standards. Now, right now, it's safe. Where their parents, we love them, we're going to guide them in the right direction. But think about the messages we're sending them as they get older. We don't want to send a message of you need to do something to please others, or you need to do something based on what someone else wants you to do. And again, I know they're kids. I know there's a line we have to walk with that, but just keep that in mind and try to get them to evaluate their outcomes whenever you feel like it's appropriate. There's going to be some cases where it's not, okay? But when there is, let them speak up about what they did. All right, put it in the chat if you have any questions or comments about that. And by the way, I love a good conflict question. So if I say anything that you disagree with, put it in the chat. I want to validate you, and then let's talk about that. Now, the next thing I want you to do is to ask your child how they would like to be supported. So what happens if our child brings home that report card and it has several C's on it? We say, okay, you're going to go to tutoring. You're going to study 3 hours a night instead of 2 hours a night. I'm going to sit down with you and help you do your work. But that's us kind of solving the issue for them. How often do we ask them, hey, what do you need? Okay, sometimes our kids are actually, they have their own plan in place. They just need some time and space to utilize it. So see if they have any ideas of what they can do to solve an issue if it's taking place. And the final thing I'd like you to do before we get into our questions and answers is to provide validation. Now we are really going to explore this one. So I like to think that there are 3 types of validation. Validation is just letting somebody know that you heard them. Now, I ask parents all the time, do you validate your kids? And often I get the response, oh yeah, I validate my kids all the time. I ask them how their day was. I repeat back to them what they said. I give them ideas that they can use to solve their problems. But that's not necessarily the validation that your child might be looking for. So let's talk about the 3 types of validation. The first type is problem solving. So let's say your child brings, let's just say your child makes a comment like, man, this math test is really hard. I just want to give up. Problem solving validation would be saying, okay, well, you need tutoring. You need to talk to the teacher. You need to try harder. So that's us trying to give them our solutions to their problem. And oftentimes that will fall on deaf ears because they weren't looking for solutions. They were just looking to express themselves in an issue. That's not the need that they needed to have met. There's dismissive problem solving. Now this one's sneaky. If your child says, man, this math class is so hard, I just want to give up. Dismissive validation is when you let somebody know you heard them, but you do it in a way that kind of conflicts with how they're feeling. So dismissive would be, oh, don't say that. You're so smart. You're going to figure this out. Just hang in there. Okay, that's great, but your child may not have been looking for a pep talk in that moment. They may have just needed you to see that they're struggling right now. Okay, now my favorite form of validation is authentic validation. Authentic validation lets someone know that you are trying to understand their experience the way that they are experiencing it. So if your child says, man, this math class is so hard, I just feel like giving up. Authentic validation would be, gosh, kid, you're really struggling with this math class. I mean, it's getting to the point where you don't even want to do this anymore. Tell me more about how you're feeling. That is authentic validation. And then your kids will say, yes, you get it. You understand that this is difficult for me. It will often make them start talking more. And then the more you talk, the more you will see sometimes a shift start to take place where they start problem solving themselves. And when they come up with the solutions to their problems, it's so much more effective than trying to receive an external solution. They're more invested in the solutions that they come up with versus a solution that someone tries to place on them. And then the really sweet spot, now when you get really good at authentic validation, you'll notice something happening. I like to call it the glimmer of hope. So the glimmer of hope usually takes the form of your child expressing a little bit of hope. And it might be something like this. Sometimes it's really veiled. It might be, man, it took me a whole hour to do my math homework last night, and today it took 45 minutes. And you can say, oh, wow, look at that. So it's still taking you a long time, but you were able to cut that time down by 15 minutes. And then you continue to validate. Before you know it, you're having a healthy conversation, and a conversation where your child is problem solving issues. If you have a kid who's really stubborn and they just want to stay in that negative mind frame, stay there with them until you hear that glimmer of hope. It always comes, but it usually does not appear until they feel like their problem has truly been heard. Put your questions or comments in the chat about that. Okay, and I believe, okay, now these are my favorite free resources for you. This is this awesome guided meditation. It's called Be the Pond. I love this. I've done it like 3 days in a row. There's an awesome website, Kids Health Institute, and then there's this really cool podcast called Adventures in Being Gifted. So check that out. If you want a full resource manual, I have a 4-page document that I can send you. Just contact me. My email is right here, and I would be happy to give that to you or answer any questions or comments that we do not get answered this evening. So with that, I will turn it back to Misty, and hopefully we have some more questions or comments.
We have lots of questions. All right. Some of these, let's see. When do I know when it's okay to let my student quit an activity such as sports or, an art? The parent wants to teach them discipline and sticking with something they've started, but also not force them to do something longer than is necessary.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because we go back to, is this kid giving up because of that fixed mindset? Oh, I'm not doing as well as I thought I was going to do at this, so I'm just going to give it up really easily. Or is this something that the kid, well, hold on, let me go back. So is it a fixed mindset thing, or is it just a lack of interest? Is this just something that the kid truly does not want to do? So in those cases, I recommend sitting down with the child and putting a plan together. So, child, tell me, what kind of milestones would you want to see happen if you stayed in this sport or with this instrument? Like what would have to happen to actually keep you motivated to want to stay in this? And then if they say, well, I'd do it better, or I'd be able to play the entire song, or I'd be able to score some points in a game, set some measurable goals, and then put some competency skills in place so that they can be working on those goals. So for example, if they want to get better, if they want to quit soccer because they're not scoring any goals, put them in some sessions, some additional sessions, maybe private tutoring sessions where they can practice soccer. Or if that's too much for you, link them up with someone you know who's really good at soccer and have that person come over and help build that competency, because competency can lead to confidence. Once they get better at something and seeing themselves progress in an area, that might be the fire they needed to stay in it. So you can try to increase their competency based on the goals that they have. Now, if this is just a lack of interest kind of thing, set like a deadline. Like, okay, let's just see by this date. If you're no longer interested in this, what's a date that you and I can agree on? Okay, so stick it out for here. I'm going to put some skills into place to improve your competency. And at this point, if you have met your goals, if you met your competency goals, you got better at this, and you still don't like it, then we can talk about doing something else.
All right. What about when a child is forgetting to take care of himself during the school day because they're consumed with that anxiety of performing, such as eating lunch, drinking water, going to the bathroom? Is this common for gifted students?
Oh, wow. Okay, so that seems like it's getting to be a little bit more on that extreme side with the, not even wanting to take a break to take care of basic needs because they have to get their work done. For that one, I definitely suggest some more intensive counseling services for that child because we need to know what's stemming that anxiety. When it gets to that point, it can sometimes be a bit more than just the work. What's really driving this need that you have to be so nonstop constantly. So I would honestly recommend, I'd recommend counseling for any gifted student, to tell you the truth. I think all gifted students need counseling, but I would definitely recommend it in that case. And sit down, have a conversation with the child, make sure nothing else is going on. You may even want to suggest like a physical exam just to make sure that child's functioning physically okay, and just take it from there. Make sure there's no other social situations happening. Are they avoiding going to different places because there's someone there who may bully them, or they just feel uncomfortable in the lunchroom? So pay attention to things like that. And then you can also check in with parents and see, like, is this only happening at school or does it happen at home too? Because that can shed more light into why this behavior is taking place. And the last thing, try to put some incentives in place too. So like see what naturally motivates this kid, set some goals of, hey, if you ate lunch today, maybe you can come by and help me with this project. Or maybe the parents can give them some extra time on like Minecraft or Roblox, like if they dedicate themselves to those healthy behaviors.
Okay. What about a student who is displaying aggression when they are in their standard class as opposed to a gifted or an advanced class?
Oh, that's really, now I could be wrong, but the first thing that came to my mind is that, okay, so that's situational. So in the advanced class, they're fine, but when they're in the regular education class, they're not. So what's happening in those regular education classes that's triggering this kid? Is it the people in it? Is it boredom because the work is not as stimulating? Is it how this kid is perceived by other kids in the classroom? They're this gifted kid, now they're in a regular class. Do they feel like an oddball? So I would explore those kinds of things to figure out why that may be happening.
Right, great. Another parent is asking how to motivate their child without creating too much external pressure, which creates stress for the student.
Yes.
Finding that balance between motivation, but not too much where they're feeling the pressure.
Yes. So what you want to do here is go back to that idea of checking in with them. So you can say, hey, I really want to be here to support you and help you any way that I can. And I love, like, I will use this green, yellow, and red chart to exhaustion. So, hey, kiddo, I want to help you. I need you to let me know, like, what's okay. Like, you like that I do this. It inspires you. It motivates you. It keeps you going. You're okay, yellow, you're kind of hesitant when I do this. It's not horrible, but you could care less or not if I did this. And then red, this puts pressure on you. It makes you feel bad about yourself. It makes you feel like you're not worthy, and then kind of operate in that green zone as much as possible. And also, parents too, think about what is motivating you to want certain things for your child. That's a biggie. Now, the response is we love our kids and we want to see them fulfill their potential. At the same time, that can backfire on us sometimes. So, for example, I'll give you an example. My advanced child was in pre-K, and he would always talk about all these really cool things. And one time he said he wanted to be an engineer. There was another time where he wanted to I can't even remember, but it was always like super fancy stuff. And I was so proud of that. And then I remember one day he comes home from pre-K, and there was an about me page, and it said, what do you want to be when you grow up? and on it he had written zookeeper. And I had to stop myself from literally contacting the school and saying, what did you people do to my child to shift his mindset from engineer to zookeeper? Like, I got really upset. But think about, it was his choice. He decided in that moment that he wanted to be a zookeeper. And what happens is that if we try to put too much motivation, external motivation on our kids to move in a certain direction, they can rebel against that. And I've seen so many adults who walked that path that their parents wanted them to walk or that others expected them to walk. They're a doctor now, they're a lawyer, they've got the fancy house, they've got the beautiful car, they've got an awesome family, and they're absolutely miserable because they're living goals that were never theirs. So pay attention to what your kids really want. Yes, they're kids, they're developing, their interests are going to change. My child does not want to be a zookeeper anymore, he wants to be something else. So just walk that line.
All right, and as we answer the last few questions, would you mind going back one slide to those 3 links? We have many parents asking for those. Excellent, so we'll just leave that slide up for a few minutes. Talk to us about how to best approach a teacher about concerns with the sensitivity towards their child. Maybe a teacher who doesn't quite understand the gifted characteristics and traits. What's the best way to approach a teacher about that?
Okay, so it's all about connection. If you have rapport with someone, you can have really difficult conversations with ease sometimes. So what you want to do is first, instead of just going in there with a problem, pay attention to what you do like about this teacher. All right, does she have really engaging assignments that she puts in front of the kids? Do you like the high expectations that she has for the kids? Maybe you don't. Is your child doing really well in her class? Whatever you do like about this teacher style, lead with that. And you first want to validate the teacher, okay? Positive sandwich here. All right, then once that rapport is established and this teacher knows that you're not just an angry parent who wants to complain, not saying you are, then what can happen is they can be more receptive to hearing you out. So I recommend build the relationship first and then go in there with your concerns, because that's when they're most likely going to really hear it, respect it, and then take action. If that doesn't happen, try looking at something like a special accommodation plan that can be put into place that can mandate accommodations that need to take place if you feel like your child's needs are not being met. There's always the opportunity of talking with the counselor if it's just a bad fit and possibly switching to another class. You know, we want to do that worst case scenario because it's nice for the kids to have stability. But if it's that much of a mismatch with the teacher, that's an option as well. But build that relationship.
All right. How about, is it bad to offer incentives to get our younger children motivated?
So it depends. The first thing that comes to my mind is you definitely don't want to give the incentive before the desired behavior takes place. That would be a bribe. All right. Now, after the desired behavior has taken place, you can give incentives, but just pay attention. You know, like, is this child, are you giving this incentive to your child as a way of saying, you did a great job and I'm proud of you? Or are you just using these incentives as breadcrumbs to keep them on a path that they don't want to be on? And that's what you want to pay attention to, and you'll know, because eventually if they don't want to be on that path, even the incentives won't work anymore.
All right, thank you. How can I get my 9-year-old to accept lower grades than he expects? He expects A+ on everything, and it upsets him, and he cries when he doesn't get grades that are that high.
Yeah.
Very
Okay.
common of gifted students.
Oh, yeah. All right, so go back to that validation piece. All right, so I'm thinking that if my kid comes home and they didn't get the grade they expected, but it was still a good grade, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say, look, like, you still got a great grade. Gifted kids don't want to hear that. Parents, they don't want to hear that. So you've got to validate. Gosh, you really wanted a higher score. You are not happy with the work that you did. Well, I'm wondering if there's anything you think you can do to get the score that you want. I'm wondering if there's any help that you might need from me to get the help that you need. How can I build your competency in that area? And I appreciate the fact that you want to do your best. So validate, validate, validate. And again, when we validate someone's perspective, what happens is we throw off the balance. Okay, so here's how it works. When someone is, let's just say someone's super depressed, and we're trying to make them happy. Well, those two things are opposite, so they balance each other out. Now, let's say someone's depressed and we hop over with them and we say, gosh, I see you're really struggling. Nothing seems to be going right. This is a really bad year for you. It upsets the balance. And so people tend to want to have balance. And so when you validate where someone's at, oftentimes you'll see this dynamic where they will start to take the other side of the argument, and they might say, well, yeah, this year's been bad, but I mean, I still was able to keep my job, and I'm still, I did get that raise. You'll start to see a shift sometimes occur. So validate and look for that glimmer of hope.
All right. What about a gifted teen that seems to have friends but clams up around adults and won't have adult conversations?
Oh, that's great. Okay, first thing that comes to, and there are a variety of different reasons these things may be happening, but the first thing that comes to my mind is just comfort level. So there's a reason this kid doesn't feel comfortable talking to adults. And why is that? Does the child think that they're going to be judged if they start talking? That's a big reason why a lot of teens shut down. You would be surprised how much your teen will talk to you if you listen to them without judgment. And yes, sometimes you may hear something that might have to have you rein them back in, but if they know that they can open up and share it with you and everything's going to be okay, they'll talk. They will. That's why kids talk to me. So that's one thought that I have. I just explore that, and it could, again, it could be developmentally appropriate. They want to be around kids their age, and they may not identify with what the adults are talking about. So I just explore it with the child.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Whitfield. We appreciate all of your expertise and the information you've shared with us today. This, like I said earlier, this is a 4-part series. Ms. Whitfield is going to be presenting all year long with us, so we're excited about our next session. That next session will be held on November 18th, and it is already available for registration on the Parent Academy website. So feel free to go ahead and grab a spot for that. We will be monitoring that, and we will be sending out information as that approaches. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been wonderful to see so many people engage in this Parent Academy, and we're excited to hopefully see you again in November. Have a good evening. Thank you, Ms. Whitfield. We appreciate your time tonight.